WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, X, and our website, www.wvtcdetroit.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. Thank you for tuning to WVTC Radio Detroit and the Community Bell Show with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner Edna Bell. Stay tuned for insightful information Detroiters will find valuable. Text a friend and tell them to watch with you for news you can use. And now, your host, Edna Bell.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? It's a wonderful day in Detroit. We welcome you to the Community Bell Show. It's 4 o'clock on Monday, so it must be the Community Bell Show. We are always so glad to have all of you come to us and listen to us and talk back to us and that kind of good stuff. But today, it's a sunny day in Detroit. Isn't that quite incredible for President's Day? Lots of folks are off today. Schools are off this week for winter break and all that sort of thing. But we've got special reason to be with you this Monday because it's also Black History Month. Should be Black History Year, should be Black History all the time. But there is this month designated as Black History Month in this nation. And we are especially privileged to have someone who knows lots about Black history, has lived much of it in his young life. And we are so pleased to have with us Mr. Candia Milton, chairman of the Black Slate. Candia, how are you this fine afternoon?
Commissioner Bell, I am doing well. I am doing well. So happy to be with you. As you mentioned, generally this time of the year, it is, we had a lot of snow on the ground, and
Yes.
this is usually designated a winter break, and folks going for Black Ski Weekend and enjoying themselves.
Isn't that amazing? I've not done that yet. Probably
I-
won't. The only way I'll get there is to sit in the lodge and have a hot toddy, as those outside are skiing up and down the slopes. That's as good as it gets for me.
I think I'm about where you are. I've had enough injuries in my life. I'm going to avoid that one there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us. Couldn't
An
talk
honor.
about Black history in Detroit, especially in Detroit, without talking about the Black Slate
Yes,
and the impact the Black Slate has had in Detroit, but across the country. So, what I'd like you to do, Candia, is to give us a little bit, not a little bit, or as much as you'd like, history about how the Black Slate got started, when it got started, and the other locations you will find it.
Okay. Yeah, let me just say thank you for inviting us on the Community Bell Show. I want to also express gratitude for what you do in this space, lifting up the stories of our people. As you mentioned, Black History is not relegated to simply 1 month.
Mhm.
It is something that we don't need a month permission to do it in a given month. We talk about it every day.
Absolutely.
So there's intentions and efforts to rid our schools, our education system, our library of that glorious history.
Isn't it amazing that we'll ban books and won't ban guns?
Won't ban guns, and now we have a legislator who they just cheered at the Republican convention, who basically said, I'm afraid that with the growth of minorities, it's an effort to take over this country, and they
Quite
just
amazing.
right. So they just cheered him. So that theory they're down with, but when it comes to critical race theory, they want to throw it out the window. So or history for that
Or
matter.
history, period. And
Right.
I think it's fear.
Right.
It's fear on their part, but it's also fear that they don't want their children to know their history. Because
Right.
if the children knew, oh my goodness,
Right.
they'd really have some issues trying to explain it. And they don't know how to explain it, don't want to explain it, so they want to hide it.
Right. So it's important for us to lift that history up.
Yes.
Not just the challenges that it speaks to perseverance of people and the strength of our people, but also the glorious history.
Absolutely.
The contributions that we've made, not just to this country, but to the world.
Absolutely.
And there are too many to count. And certainly, if we started naming them, we wouldn't scratch the surface in the time that we have today. But you asked me to talk about the Black Slate's history
Yes.
here in
Yes. The
Detroit.
Shrine of Black Madonna. Yes.
Yes, indeed. And so
That's the real history for us.
So people who know that the Black Slate started in 1973. In fact, we just celebrated our 50-year anniversary just last year.
Yes, I was there. Yes.
Which was a fun time. I
Yes, it
really
was.
enjoyed it. I enjoyed one, reliving that history.
Mhm.
Even folks who were original to the Black Slate in that iteration, really sharing stories that I was not familiar with. And so
Mhm.
it was just inspiring, and really, lit a fire under me to continue in this work. And so people know it to have been incorporated in 1973, but the history of the Black Slate really goes back to before the Black Slate even began.
Mhm.
Our founder, Reverend Albert B. Clegg, with the migration of African Americans coming to Detroit from the South, had recognized that we were actually coming to be a critical mass. and saw that there was an opportunity for us to really build some political power. People who were coming from the South were escaping segregation, only to find that, or should I say, Jim Crow laws, only
Yes.
to find that housing segregation in the North was prevalent. But our founders saw that as an opportunity to bring Black folk together to elect Black officials who really had our best interest in mind. And
Mhm.
so in 1961, there was the creation of what was called the Illustrated News. Many people know it as the Pink Sheet, which, the authors of the Pink Sheet talked about what was going on in our communities, lifted up people who were doing positive things in our communities, but also fought against some of the atrocities and the oppression that was happening, and really called out folks, and in some instances called them in to the extent necessary. But through the Pink Sheet, made recommendations on how people should be voting. At the time, in the late 50s, early 60s, we were not electing and voting for Black people to represent our issues. And so, our founder waged a campaign called For No More, and then another one which introduced Black folk to the concept of plunking, right?
Yes.
So for
Yes.
city council, For No More. And that really saw one of our first council members be elected in Nicholas Hood.
Mhm.
Was it the second? I think it was the number. It's one of the Nicholas Hoods.
Yes. Well, it was the fatherhood, the
Yeah,
first,
fatherhood.
the
Was
first pastorhood.
elected. Yeah, it saw the election of uh, of then Nicholas Hood, but then also the 3+1, which was a congressional race
Mhm.
where we saw the election of our first Black congressman in Charles Diggs. Uh,
Yes.
and so that was the Pink Sheet, and that was the first the iteration of the Black slate before it was a Black slate.
Mhm.
And then fast forward, we had what was a redistricting effort, and in an effort to gerrymander the district, which again, the Pink Sheet was instrumental in fighting against and drawing the lines in a way
Mhm.
that we had representation. But what we saw throughout the country over that next 10 to 13 years, we saw the election of other Black mayors throughout the country. And so in Cleveland, there was a Black mayor that was elected, and his name eludes me at the time that we're talking right now. But
I
that
wanna say,
really,
was it Stokes?
yeah, Stokes,
Stokes,
yep,
I believe
Stokes,
it was Stokes,
Stokes was
yes.
his name.
Uh-huh.
And that really inspired Reverend Clegg to really be even more intentional around building Black power, and so hence the creation of the Black Slate in 1973. Now, there's an interesting story behind the Black Slate and really how the legend of it began. And so what we had was the election. It was a mayoral election going on in that year, and there were two candidates who presented themselves to uh, to actually a committee that was the Black Slate at the time, which included our founder, Barbara Martin, who is the sister of our founder, as well
Mhm.
as three other members who were all associated with the Shrines of the Black Madonna. And what was interesting is, and I can just see it in my mind's eye as the story is told to me, and that is they were all in a room, and the two candidates, uh, Attorney Bell and Senator Coleman Young, presented their platform. And as the story goes, they were both head to head, dynamic speakers, laying out their agenda around access to affordable housing, around access to jobs, the schools, better schools, and how there needs to be a relationship with with the schools,
Mhm.
better transportation. A lot of the things that we're facing today, like a lot of the challenges we're facing in our community today,
Still there.
was the platform that they both put forward and were dynamic. But then Coleman Young, Senator Young said, but what I will promise you is that as soon as I get into office, and this was the difference between the two, as soon as I get into office, I'm going to eliminate stress.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was the commitment he made, to eliminate stress, which we know to be we know it today to be the stop and frisk policies of
Yes.
police departments, that led to, you know, everything from use of force,
To murder.
misuse of force,
Mhm.
as well as the killing of unarmed black
Black men,
men, black
black boys.
people,
Yes.
period. And so that was the only difference between the two of them in their platform. And we then, the Black Slate, then our founder in that committee, decided to go with Senator Young. Now,
Mhm.
going into that, a lot of folks thought that Attorney Bell was going to get the endorsement.
Yes.
Very popular, very active, you know, very forward thinking.
Mhm.
That was a distinction between the two. And what people don't realize is that we were the only organization. The Black Slate was the only organization, no labor unions,
That's
no
right.
congressional districts. In fact, we were the only grassroots political organization at the time. So, you know, so no other organization endorsed his candidacy for mayor. We were it. And so we then endorsed Mayor Young, and we marshaled the community and rallied the community behind his candidacy. But we also thought it was important that he also had a city council that
Yes.
supported his agenda.
Absolutely.
And people ask the question, why would a pastor, right,
Mhm.
get so involved in politics when there's this quote unquote separation of church and state? Now, our pastor, Reverend Clegg, our founder, believed that every aspect of our life is sacred, right? So
Mhm.
that's his depth. Every aspect. It doesn't matter what it is. And so our politics, which is part and parcel of our strategy for self-determination, right?
Yep.
Our politics then are sacred. And so that was his approach. And so that's why we, as you know, as the Black Slate, which is largely made up of members, not that it's a requirement, but it's largely made up of members of the Shrine of the Black Madonna, because it is our faith that informs the work itself. And that is, every aspect of our life is sacred. Therefore, we're in this space. So our economics are sacred. You know, our community is sacred.
Mhm.
Our relationships are sacred, and our politics are sacred.
Absolutely. I know it well. I've sat before that committee on many occasions. And anybody who has sat there knows that it is not an easy sit. And it has nothing to do whether the people like you, whether you're friends with them or not.
Right.
It has to do with what your politics are and what you believe and how you believe in our community. So, yes, I have sat through the interviews of the Black Slate on many occasions. It is a tough sell.
Well, and you know, and as much as we are unapologetic when it
Mhm.
comes to supporting Black leadership, but we also think it's important that we get the best qualified candidate
Yes.
that can advance the issues of Black people. And it is not always the Black candidate that we endorse. However, you know, if you take a look at our track record, it is largely the Black candidates that we endorse.
And I would like to say the best candidates that you've endorsed.
Right,
They just
right,
happen to be the best.
right. They happen to be the best, and we're an organization too that is one member, one vote. So,
Mhm.
you know, as much as I sit there as the chair, I'm more of a facilitator of the conversation, and everyone the vote is taken, and we speak as one voice once that vote is taken, not in spite of the margins, right? So
Yeah.
I voted no. No, you don't have that. You sit on this committee. Your commitment is to advance the will of the committee itself.
Absolutely. It's a we, not an I.
Exactly.
It's a we. And once we do it, we support it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So so it is, that fateful day in '73. It was a really an inflection point in our engagement politically.
And interestingly enough, it was an inflection point for the city
Yeah.
because the city had never seen that kind of involvement from a Black community-based organization. Never had that happen in terms of an organization making those kinds of endorsements, but also putting the boots on the ground
Right.
to make sure that their endorsement was heard and seen and worked.
Yeah, and I will say times have changed, right? But at that time, I mean, these were all volunteers.
Yes.
Nobody got paid to do this work. There were no people consulting to get signatures collected. We did all of the work through the power of volunteerism. This is a group of
Yes.
whether members of the church or associated with the church or just wanted Black leadership. This was a group of people bringing their talents to bear and giving of those talents and getting nothing individually monetarily in return.
And isn't that interesting that was the way most of us grew up in politics? It was volunteers. Nobody got paid on election day to work the polls.
No.
Nobody got paid to collect signatures. Nobody got paid to make phone calls. And then all of a sudden something happened in the 80s and early 90s and now everybody wanted to get paid.
Everybody gets, yeah. And it's confounding. Well, it used to be confounding to me. I guess it's closer now. But I remember, so I grew up as I'm a lifelong member of the Black Slate. And I remember we would have a baseball game. Let's say it's at Broad Street in Collingwood area. So that's the Dexter Davison area. We would, after the baseball game, we would go door to door all the way back to our neighborhood, dropping off literature, because we didn't have a walk sheet and we need to go to this likely voter or that likely voter. We went to every house.
Yes.
And if there was an apartment building, we had to leave something on the stairs in that apartment building for people to pick up and take with them. And so we went to every house all the way back to our communities. We were dropped off and went to every house, entire baseball team. So it's about 15 of us of us would go all the way back to the neighborhood, going door to door. Again, not a dime, not even an ice cream cone at the end.
It was, and it turned somehow, somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, it changed.
Yeah.
Then everybody was asking, well, how much are you paying? And it was really quite amazing.
Yeah.
And to this day, it still amazes me. I understand it. It's the thing of the day, but I certainly remember we did all of that free.
Right.
And particularly when Coleman Young was running. Oh my goodness, everybody, at least most of us, were passing out stuff for free. We were excited. But it was quite amazing that everybody wants to get paid now. And many of them don't remember the days when this was just a community activity. You were so impressed with the candidate that you wanted to support them in whatever way you could.
And what's interesting, Ms. Bell, is that many of them never even participated in that component, right? That not only do they not remember, they weren't even a part of the volunteer component.
Exactly.
Right. And so I guess not having participated in that aspect of a campaign in that way, it's not something that they
they have nothing to compare it to, so they just don't know anything any better, I guess.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so that, and then, I guess we can get into the candidates beyond that day. But it was, it was, that's really the founding of the Black Slate.
Absolutely. We've got somebody online who says hello to you, Larry Whitfield, saying hello to you.
Oh, Larry, my
Yes.
friend.
Yes.
Yes.
Back many years.
Yeah. So we worked together. It was my first job out of college. Check this. We were selling pagers, and he was I think, customer care supervisor. And man, that's a good brother. Larry, how you doing, man?
Isn't that something? You never know who you're
Yeah,
gonna run into or who's gonna be listening.
yeah. So
Yes.
he and he was actually, we were running buddies at the time. We were working together. So him and a friend of mine, Joseph Coleman. Yeah, good brother there.
Wow. And selling pages. Wow, isn't that something?
Yes, indeed.
Pagers. My goodness.
Yeah, I know. Remember, we thought that was the technology.
That was it. You know, if you had a pager, all you had to do was find a payphone someplace to call the whoever was paging you. Isn't that amazing?
Yes,
Those things my grandchildren don't even understand. They don't have a clue to what I'm talking about when I say a payphone.
Right. That's something.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Black Slate was instrumental in getting so many people elected, so many influential African Americans and Caucasians elected to positions where they could support our community.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, everybody from Barbara Rose Collins, John Conyers, I mentioned Diggs, Mary Blackman, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
Jackie
My
Vaughn.
buddy. And me.
I was coming down the road there. Judge Cynthia Bell,
Joanne Watson,
Cynthia Stevens, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Carolyn, her son, Kwame Kilpatrick. People try not to mention his name. Mention his name. I'm still going to mention his name.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that you can point to that's happening now in the city that is a direct result of his vision.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so I don't think that we can deny that, especially on this program.
Absolutely not.
And as we talk about these leaders, if I can share, example of why representation is important. Today we are, there's this effort to dial back a lot of the harms of the crime bill that was signed into law by then President Clinton.
Yep.
It incentivized the growth of the prison system, and now we see 2 million people incarcerated today. Explosion.
Most of them African Americans.
Exactly. But there are 2 Congress people who were in Washington that represented the city, and they both voted no on that crime bill. And they also both voted no on the NAFTA free trade agreement. And before Barbara Rose Collins, the Honorable Barbara Rose Collins passed, I was at her house maybe 2 months before she passed. And she asked me, well, Candia, what are you doing nowadays? And I told her, I'm the government affairs director for an organization that does criminal justice reform in Washington, D.C. And she was in her bed and she lit up like Broadway and said, I told that Clinton, that President Clinton, that this crime bill, and she laid right that his crime bill was going to do nothing more than lock up Black men. And she said, and that's what's happened up to this point. And so when people ask the question, why, does Black representation matters? That's a prime example of why it matters. The then Congresswoman and congressmen
Mhm.
Conyers, both have lived experience in our communities and know the disparate impact that this criminal justice system has had on our communities from its founding. And
Yes.
they had the foresight to know that the creation of this bill would further those disparities and lock up more Black men during this period than we saw at any point during the enslavement period.
Isn't that incredible? Absolutely
And-
incredible.
right. And
But you
so
got to live it to understand it.
exactly. They've lived it, they felt it, they knew what the impact was going to be. And so when people say, well, why does, Black representation, why does that matter? I'll give you another example. I spend about 2 weeks out of the month here in Washington, D.C., and then 2 weeks back home here in Detroit. And in my work, I have to build relationships with the different caucuses, in particular, the Congressional Black Caucus.
Mhm.
And I go to these meetings and they are talking about divvying up resources for their respective districts. And at one of the meetings, it was an aha moment
Hmm.
because we don't have any representation
That
in
say
the
it.
Congressional Black Caucus, and they are divvying up resources for their respective districts in Detroit, an
Nothing.
85% African American city is absent from the table.
Isn't that incredible? The
Most
largest
powerful
Black city in
caucus
the country.
Pardon?
The largest Black city in the country.
Exactly. And the most powerful caucus
Yes.
in Congress doesn't have representation from us.
Amazing.
And so we, we have to come together and organize and build a solution for what is a problem for us.
Absolutely.
And so, the Black Slate, while in 73 was the only organization, there are a number of slates that exist today.
Yes.
And I will state that many of them in their founding were founded by people who were members of the Black Slate.
Mm-hmm. And they resemble the Black Slate. They just don't have the same name.
Right. Well, but they were also founded by people who were members of the Shrines of the Black Madonna and the Black Slate,
Mm-hmm.
and which in their interest is aligned with ours.
Absolutely.
And so I see that as one of the successes of the Black Slate, is that now we have all of these organizations, and now the opportunity, and thus we have greater reach.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so now the opportunity is us all coming together, right?
Yes.
And maximizing on that reach so that we can make certain that we have the kind of representation in Washington, D.C., so that we can be at the kind of tables that brings resources that are so desperately needed to our communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you talked about the impact of the crime bill and the incarceration of Black men, look at the impact that had on the census, because folks sometimes don't know that those men who are incarcerated in all those small towns around Michigan, the small towns get the benefit of having all those Black folks in their jails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They get the benefit. We lose the benefit. And the money for having those folks in their jails goes to those small towns. Absolutely incredible.
Right. Right.
Absolutely incredible. And so when the people talk about census and crime, they're connected. There is absolutely a connection between the two, because the resources that we would have if many of those Black men were in the cities where they grew up, we'd have more money.
Right.
Instead, the money is going to cities that don't want the Black folks there if they're not in prison.
Right. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And what's crazy about that is that, one, those resources go there to that particular city. They're incarcerated with no real programmatic structure
Yes.
that would make for a successful reentry, right? So 90% of the people who were incarcerated at some point will return back to the community. And so
Yes.
here they are being warehoused for anywhere between 3 and 25 or 30 years in
Hmm.
these prisons, and coming out with no programmatic structure that would make for a successful reentry, nor a programmatic structure that will prevent recidivism,
Yes, absolutely.
while also dealing with the collateral consequences of incarceration, thus, you know, checking the box. And even if they don't have to check the box, there is still a background check that
And
eliminates people.
it comes up. Absolutely. And the money, even if they're only there 3, 4, 5 years, the money stays there for 10 years.
It stays exactly.
So,
So you,
so
yeah.
when I
So
tell people, please fill out that census,
absolutely,
uh, it
absolutely,
makes a difference.
big,
It makes a difference.
big difference. Yeah. But Ben, and all of it is tied, right? I mean, we talk about electoral politics, but things as simple as a census has a big impact.
Yes, and sometimes people don't connect the dots,
Right.
and so we try to help them connect those dots to know that what you do in the census impacts somebody someplace else that's going to get all your money.
Exactly.
When
Yeah.
your kinfolk come back to the city, that money's not coming back with them when they come back. That money stays in that small community.
Stays right there.
It stays
and,
right
and,
there.
and they are happy to receive it.
Oh, absolutely.
Happy to receive
They
it.
are happy to get every penny of it.
Yeah.
And so the issue you raised in terms of Black representation and not having anybody at the table to represent us is critical, particularly in this election year when we have an opportunity to
Mhm.
send someone to the table.
Right. Right. There is an opportunity, for both the Senate seat, um,
Yes,
and what we see as an immediate opportunity. Was that the 12th district?
it's the 13th, the House of
13th? Right,
Representatives,
13th district.
13th congressional district. We
Right.
have an opportunity to send a young man. And when I say that, I say it because we need somebody who's going to have some longevity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because people may not know, but in Congress, if you're a young person, you get there first year, you really don't have a whole lot of power. You've got to be there to get some power. And so we need somebody who's young enough to be there long enough to get some power.
To build that seniority.
Yes.
It is so critical. Just in the interest of full disclosure, we have endorsed Adam Ollier.
And that's just a wonderful thing because I had him on my show.
Okay.
first Monday in this month
Yeah,
was
yeah.
Mr. Adam Ollier, who will soon be Congressman Ollier. I'm just putting it out there. That's what it's going to be.
And let's put it out there together.
Yes.
Because we missed the opportunity the last go around, and I think we have a great opportunity in front of us this go around. And for those who were a part of the campaign that last go around,
Mhm.
I hope folks aren't weary, and recognize that whether it's this issue or any other issue, we're in a protracted struggle for self-determination.
Mhm.
And this particular office is a part of that protracted struggle that we all need to stay in and engage in, because our futures really do depend on it. I know that every election cycle we talk about it being the most important election, that in our lifetime, and it can get cliches and maybe even fall on deaf ears. But this is really, I'll use the term again, an inflection point in our history relative to representation.
Absolutely.
We we don't have representation in Congress. We've seen a redistricting that has us with less representation in the state.
Hmm.
both House and Senate. But then we also don't have, for the first time since 1973, a black mayor.
Absolutely.
So, we really need to make a statement about who we are, uh, and what we stand for, when it comes to Black leadership. And I think that the election of Adam Hollier, can be a statement that Detroit does mean what it says and is about, making certain that we are, building and maintaining Black leadership.
Absolutely. That has got to be the message, because it isn't, sure, it's for us, but we've got a lot of young people who are watching what's going on.
Mhm, mhm.
And we need to make sure that we give them the kind of information, the kind of education that lets them know that there is a history in this city of strong Black leadership.
Correct.
Uh, from the mayor to the council to the Congress people, there's a history. And they need to know that they need to be a part of making sure that that is maintained
Mm,
or rekindled, I should say,
right, right.
because it's to their best interest to do that.
Mhm,
It's to
mhm.
our best interest to do that. Yeah, I'm a senior now. I'm loving it. But it's in my best interest to have my young people
Right.
know how important it is for me and for them to get that leadership back to a point where you have people who recognize, who have lived the experience,
Mhm,
who can
mhm.
talk about it in strong terms about what has happened to them personally and what should happen to their children. I've got grandchildren who are in high school now.
Mhm.
One will be going off to college this fall. We need to make sure that those young people take with them a sense of pride and a sense of leadership and a sense of responsibility,
Right,
that I do have a stake in this. It's important to me and my family
right.
that I get involved in this. And so this past Saturday, I took one of my grandsons to the Horace Sheffield Center, and where they
Ah,
had Ken Coleman talking about uh, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley and the history and explaining what really happened
mhm,
with
mhm.
I-75, and how Cobo and Mariani really, how racist they were and how they destroyed the Black businesses that were in Paradise Valley and Black Bottom. And our children need to know that story and hear that story. And so it was interesting as I watched my grandson listen, and some of it he understood, obviously, some of it he didn't, but I chimed in every now and then to say, okay, you see that street, Verner? That was part of Paradise Valley. That street I was born on in Trinity Hospital, that was in Paradise Valley. And you see
Mm,
that street in Combe, that's the street that your great grandmother lived on, the street that I would go visit her when I was a young kid. And that's where my parents lived when I was born, before they moved to Royal Oak Township, to try and give him some context as to where that is and where he comes from and where his metal is, and
right.
the Black folks that were put out of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. Many of them moved to Conant Gardens. It's where my parents lived and where I grew up. So, and then the Royal Oak Township folk. Yeah, there's some history and some connectivity here that young
Mhm,
people ought to know
mhm,
about. When
mhm.
I-75 was built, how it went around the Hamtramck community and knocked out the Black community.
Right.
And that lawsuit was just settled 10 years ago. Just settled, the discrimination lawsuit that was filed was just settled, and the federal government had to pay because they were wrong when they did that. And so all of those things people need to know, and they don't know, and we need to help them know.
Yeah, and it's so critical. Um, you know, I think it is a helps with, when we talk about the sense of responsibility,
Mhm,
around civic engagement. In this case, a sense of responsibility around voting. Uh,
mhm.
so often, you know, we talk about how our ancestors died in their fight for our rights to vote. We talk about, oh, your vote matters, and I something tells me that those messages don't seem to be resonating. Um,
We
and
need to make it more personal.
and I think and to that point, we need to figure out, a different message that does grab, because what we're saying and what we're doing is not working.
Yes.
Here is what my experience tells me, is that elected leaders tend to respond to people who vote.
Yes.
And why do seniors why do people always go to seniors, and then why do seniors get what they need in the legislature a lot of times?
Because they know we vote.
Yes, they vote. And so here's where I'm going with this. Yes, my vote matters, but it matters because I see myself as being a part of a larger voting block.
Mm-hmm.
And if we see ourselves as a part of a larger voting block, and we vote as a block, as an interest group, then we can make certain demands that is representative of our turnout.
Yes.
But if we're turning out at 15%, then
16% last time we had a primary. Horrible.
Right. So if we're turning out in those low numbers, and you're saying, well, what is government doing for me? Well,
they don't care about you because you didn't vote.
You didn't vote. Right. Politicians, no insult to you, but if I know that one thing is a through line amongst politicians, is that every one of them want to get reelected.
Exactly. And they look at the numbers. They look at where the votes came in.
Yeah. And who I need to be responsive to. They look for where the votes came in and where the money came in.
Yes.
And so if we don't have the money to give, then the power is in organized people in mass at the ballot box.
Absolutely.
And so we need to be showing up in mass as a people at the ballot box, and thus command and make demands. As much as we are loyal to a single party and the most loyal demographic to that party, right, to the Democratic Party,
and particularly Black women,
right,
we need to make a statement.
Exactly, and then forced to make demands at that point. But we need to get out and vote. We need to see ourselves not as an individual, but as a part of a larger purpose, a larger voting block. And if I don't get out there and vote, then the block is smaller and smaller and smaller. Thus, we are less powerful to make the kind of demands that we need to be making to have an impact on our community.
There it is. Very well said. Very well said. That's the kind of information we need to share with lots of folks, and we need to somehow get that message to particularly our young people. Make sure they're registered and make sure they're getting out there to vote. Candia, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been wonderful. We're going to have you back. We never have enough time to talk about all the things we need to talk about.
Are we done that quick? You told me that we had 50 minutes. Oh, we are at 50 minutes. Huh? Well, I certainly appreciate this. And it's always a pleasure and honor being in your presence, whether it be physically or virtual. I always, gain knowledge just listening to you. People talk about mentors in our community, but having a seat sometime at the time that I've had at the table, I saw it as an opportunity for you to mentor me when you didn't even know you were mentoring me. So I appreciate you for always bringing your presence, your knowledge, and your full self in a way that's authentic and advances, our issues as a people. So thank you.
We're going to come back because we still got some more talking to do, and we still have some people to get elected in a few months. So we've got some work to do. Thank you so much.
Look forward to working with you and the opportunity to come back.
All righty. Have a great week in DC and go get that money.
All right. Thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for being on the Community Bell Show. It's Monday at 4:00. See you next Monday at 4:00 for the Community Bell Show. We'll have someone else very interesting for you to meet, talk to, share your thoughts with. And who knows, it may be a sunny 75 degrees in Detroit. Wishful thinking. I can't go to the golf course, but that's okay. Have a great week. Thanks, Candia.
All right. Thank you again. Bye, Madam Chair.
Thank you for listening to Community Bell with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner, Edna Bell. This broadcast was brought to you by WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, tell a friend to tune in. We'll see you next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern to the Community Bell Show, right here on WVTC Radio Detroit.
We are WVTC. What is Detroit Gospel Internet Radio? What it is? We're gospel music, preaching, teaching, encouraging. What it is? All up in what it is. The community. What it is? WVTC. In your neighborhood, it's what we do. What it is.
Go to your Apple or Google Play Store and download the WVTC Gospel Radio app today. You can also say, Alexa, play WVTC Radio Skills.
Would you like to play WVTC Radio Network?
Absolutely. Download it today.
You're listening to WVTC Gospel Radio Detroit, and we're flowing in the Spirit.